Hey guys, it's Adelia and welcome back to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. So, I want to start this episode off a little differently because this conversation today actually hits really close to home for me, and I'm sure it will for you too. There was a point in my life after I had my son and went back to work where I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Because I couldn't function the way I used to. I couldn't keep up. This job that I'd been doing for years suddenly felt impossible, and I genuinely thought that I was the problem. It's like I'd lost something, like I just wasn't capable anymore. But what I didn't understand at the time was that nothing was wrong with me. Everything around me just no longer fit. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. I'm joined by Narelle Vega, and this is one of the conversations that completely reframes what so many of us experience in midlife. Because we've been sold this idea that we should be able to do it all: career, kids, life, everything, and just keep pushing through when we can't. And when we can't, we turn inwards. We start blaming ourselves. But Narelle challenges all of that. She works with women in midlife who are burnt out, questioning everything and feeling like they've somehow failed. And instead of trying to fix them, she looks at the bigger picture, the system, the expectations, the reality of what women are actually carrying. We talk about capacity versus capability, which honestly changed the way I think about myself. We talk about ADHD, perimenopause, burnout, and why so many women hit this wall and think it's just them. This conversation felt like a massive exhale for me, and I think it will for you too. Narelle is a career development practitioner who works with women in midlife, helping them navigate career and life transitions in a way that actually takes into account who we are as women, our capacity, our health, and our changing seasons. All the things that the traditional career path just completely ignores. And what I love about her approach is that it's not just practical, it's deeply validating. So let's dive into this conversation with Narelle. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Odelia. This is a podcast about transformation for women who are waking up to who they really are while navigating everything that comes with midlife. And I want you to know I'm on this journey right alongside you. This is the show where we explore everything from the spiritual tools that can help us in our daily practices, to healing modalities that we can use to heal what we've been carrying for so long, to the everyday midlife topics that a midlife woman faces, like perimenopause, finances, career changes, and so much more. Each week we go deeper into what it means to heal, to awaken, and to finally become the most authentic version of yourself. I'm so glad that you found your way here. Narelle, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I'm so glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Before we dive into your work, I'd like to start with you. So can you share with us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to the work you're doing now?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me and listening in, and whoever's out there listening in, thank you. So me, look, I think career probably was my biggest challenge. So things I didn't know when I was younger. I'm neurodivergent, so late identified autistic ADHD. Learned about that gem when I was about 49. So had a lot of challenges with burnout and health issues related to that I couldn't explain. But, it was a struggle. By the time I was 30, I'd gotten married, had 2 kids and divorced. So I found myself in my early 30s, a single mum, having had the first sort of, 10 or so years of my career doing something I hated, which was administrative work and bookkeeping. And thought after I got a divorce, as a lot of women do, they cut their hair short or do something crazy. I went back to school and thought, I'm really interested in this natural therapies thing because it had helped me with bouts of chronic glandular fever and burnout previously. So off I went and studied remedial massage and polarity therapy. I didn't even know what polarity therapy was. It was this weird energetic woo-woo stuff, but it seemed like the balance to remedial massage, and I fell in love with it, and just it felt like home, and it made sense to me. So understanding the energetic nature of our bodies, and it's very much steeped in Ayurvedic philosophy. There's a few other things thrown in, but the mainstay theories that it draws from Ayurveda, and I actually went on to study Ayurvedic wellness coaching in recent years. So for me, I sort of found, working on people's bodies that start telling me stuff because, the trauma and the memories and the pain that we, were pushing down was getting trapped. And so I realized that I needed to study counseling. I was getting told some really like big things, when I was just working on people's bodies. And so I studied counseling and started working in that space. And that evolved over the years, alongside of, part-time work within industry. And, I just kept hearing these stories from women, and it became clear to me that while career was a challenge for me for my own reasons, it was a challenge for a lot of women. And so I started doing a little bit of work in the career space. And it just, it struck me as such an important thing. And, I later on studied postgrad level qualifications in career development, and career has now been redefined as, what we do with our life. So whatever meaningful engagement we have, not just paid jobs, but it could be study, it could be volunteering work, it could be caring roles, whatever it is we do and how we sort of weave that all together. And so it became a real point of interest to me, particularly for women. Along the way, I was headhunted for a role to work with the Defence Force Transition Program in Australia. And what I realised is our veterans and women have very similar problems. A lot of them sit around capacity, around burnout, around, self-identity and re-engineering that identity in midlife. So, that's my professional journey. Along the way, I've raised 2 kids. I'm now 52 and in full flight perimenopause. I live with autoimmune diseases as well as neurodivergence. I just listened to your podcast yesterday with Ariana Morgan, and I just thought, oh my God, this woman's speaking my language, and I think it's a language a lot of women speak. 80% of girls that are neurodivergent are not diagnosed at age 18. So they're not getting that childhood diagnosis, as you probably know. So we're left to fend for ourselves, and often that comes out the woodwork in midlife. And there's now a subset of Gen X that are called the lost generation for that reason. So yeah, ADHD is particularly prevalent because estrogen and dopamine have such a close relationship. But beyond that, I think there's a lot more than just ADHD coming out the woodwork. So I've really focused in on, looking after myself. I've built my career around being a career counsellor and working from home. I live in regional Australia, so I work online anywhere, certainly in Australia, but can support women worldwide, provided we speak the same language and we have an internet connection, and it's not 2 a.m. for me because I try to be asleep then. I'm often not, but I do.
Yeah, sleep's important. Sleep is very important.
It really is.
Especially when you have perimenopause, because, you're going to be up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning anyway, so...
Yeah, it's like witching hour, 2 to 4 a.m. And one of my menopausal symptoms, which no one warned you about, is really severe histamine intolerance. So between the hormones, the cortisol, the histamine, it's like I'm going to be awake.
Yeah. I actually want to do a show on like the most uncommon symptoms of perimenopause, because I think we talk about all the common ones, but I've seen, doing my own research, I've seen some stuff that I'm like, oh my God, I had that, and I had no idea that's perimenopause because nobody talks about that.
Yep. I had 2 doses of Vertigo that actually had me in a dark room horizontal for 5 days, not eating at a time.
Oh my God.
So, and it's just like, and even the doctors go, oh, this couldn't be hormones, but you read about perimenopause, it's like, yeah, it is. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's bigger than what we think, and it affects a lot more than what we think.
Absolutely.
So I love that you bring up the topic of ADHD. Like you said, I had the show with Ariana Morgan, and that for me it was also eye-opening. And in my own life, I know that I've now going through the process of being diagnosed because I suspect that I have ADHD. And just to know that, all these things that you've experienced throughout your life, like there's nothing wrong with you, even though despite you being told there's something wrong with you, you're lazy, you're this, you're that, you're actually not. Your brain just works very differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's such an important thing, especially now. And I'm so glad that it's sort of becoming more, we're becoming more aware of it through social media. And I mean, so I think it's a great time to be alive because we have this opportunity to be able to share this information and create this awareness, because I would have continued the rest of my life not knowing that actually there's nothing wrong with me. There's, it's just my brain works differently. And for me, it particularly hit after I had my first son, and I went back to work, and I was like, just could not believe that my brain just could not function anymore. But it was because of that. I was starting perimenopause, and you get overwhelmed, and you just can't. The strategies that worked before don't work anymore.
Absolutely. And you
And
wind up in a blame and shame spiral.
yeah, exactly. And so for me, that was very difficult, like going back to work and realizing that I could not perform the way that I used to, and I could not do the role anymore that I was doing up until that point. Because to be very honest, I wasn't actually happy in that role, in that career. But I'd managed to sort of, get up in every day and go and do it and deal with it. But
Yeah.
eventually, that was sort of an awakening for me that I can't carry on this path. And as the years went, it became even more, it became more difficult, to the point where last year I did a pivot in my career. It's still sort of along the same lines, still the same industry, but it's slightly different. And I'm now in a role that actually serves my ADHD, um, and I'm far more happier. So, what would you say? I know a lot of women are going to go through the same thing, right? You get to that point in midlife where you can't function at the same capacity as you could before. So, do you think it's the system that needs to change for women?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, it's a huge call for structural change. And I guess the background behind why I think that is, you like me are Gen X, and I think some women bumping against this are probably older millennials. But, in our day, think back to your mother and your grandmother. Did they work full time? Were they breadwinners? Were single parent families common? No, they weren't. Did we have career heroes or role models? No, we didn't, because those that went before us didn't work. They carried an unpaid load, and they carried it well, and it gave them flexibility that allowed them to care for children, to care for their elders, to deal with themselves when they went through things like menopause. And even just some women every month have horrendous periods. So they didn't need to layer a paid job or career in any significant way on top of that. And so we're probably the first generation of women to meaningfully engage with the world of work. And the system's gone great. Productivity, the government's gone great. Tax money in our pockets. Women have gone great. I can do something that's beyond being a carer, that allows me, the intellectual stimulation and the sense of purpose and meaning, and the reward of doing that. But what the system didn't do was tell us how to balance all of those loads. It didn't take them away. It didn't tell men to pull their fingers out and do more at home. It didn't really give us any idea how to balance it other than just pile it on. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest in that context why women at our age are starting to fall apart and go, I can't do this anymore. The biggest rise in entrepreneurship is women in midlife, because they go, well, shit, that's the only solution I can think of at this moment to get what I need to look after me and still have the income, which, with family breakdown, single parents, and all of those things, is increasingly important for women for that security. A man is not a plan into retirement. And statistically, I don't know what the UK is like, but in Australia, the fastest growing demographic of homelessness is women in, their 50s and 60s. Women are retiring with so much less super even now. So, yeah, it's no surprise. And, a lot of us on the medical side haven't been diagnosed, so don't understand our own struggles. So that's a whole nother layer of challenge. And I actually read some data that's come out just about how women are treated by the medical fraternity generally. They don't believe us when we're in pain. We're more likely to have certain problems, like autoimmunity is one. So not only in all of that additional workload, when we go to our doctors for help, we're often not believed.
100%, 100%. I've definitely experienced that. Oh my goodness. I don't want to generalize in the UK,
Yeah.
because obviously not all doctors are the same, but I had the most horrendous experience after I had my first son, where I was suffering from postnatal depression and anxiety. And I went to my doctor, and he just said to me, go home and enjoy your baby. You're getting upset about nothing. And I was so devastated because I was like, there is definitely something is not right and I need help. And
Yeah.
I ended up having to go to a private doctor and pay a lot of money to finally get her to say, and she, you know, satisfied my anxiety, and she ran blood tests to check everything. And then she also sort of let me come to my own conclusion, where I came back to her office the one day and I said, you know what, I think I have postnatal anxiety and depression. And she was like, I think so too, and I'm going to refer you for counseling. But it took, you know, I had to go into the private system to pay for, which was quite expensive,
Yeah.
to get taken seriously. And
Yeah.
then, you know, being a new mother, nobody believes you when you come with your sick child to a doctor. I mean, that's just one example that I've experienced myself.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and now to the point where I don't even want to go talk to a doctor about perimenopause, because I feel like whenever I have to go for a doctor's appointment, I was saying this to someone the other day, like I have the script in my head. I have to prepare the script in my head of how am I going to convince you that there's something wrong? Like, what do I need to say? What do I have to remember to say? Do I have to have a list? And I'm sure a lot of women feel like that, but I don't think men have to go through the same thing.
No, no. And look, my sort of internal script is, no matter what, this is not normal for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Um,
I like that.
yeah, and it just it works with almost anything.
Mm.
This is not normal for me. This is not my usual experience of my body or my life.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, look, it is difficult in the medical system. I know resources are
Mm.
stretched, and
Yeah.
I agree some doctors are better than others. But
Yeah.
even the studies on menopause, there's been so much money poured into other things. Yet every single woman, if you're born with a uterus, you're going to go through it one way, shape, or form. I don't understand why there's not been more studies done into it. And yes, bioidentical HRT and things are around now, but they're also not always the answer. It's about finding that balance. They've got this revision of the women's health study that was done in the early 2000s that, basically said, HRT is bad, it'll give you cancer and, you're all going to die. So they've revised that and realised it was poorly designed, and they've got more data, which is great. So, and they've got better drugs, which is great. But that's not the answer in its fullest. It's not for everyone. And I think the world needs to recognise these capacity shifts women are going through. And as I said, we're the first generation, so I guess we're all on a learning curve here.
Yeah.
But women also need to recognise that, I had this great career plan, but it was based on the career plans that were men modelled and gave us. You go to school, you get your qualifications, you get a job, you work your way up the food chain. Hopefully you retire at 65 with a gold watch. And it's a pretty linear trajectory up, whereas women's careers go up and down and up and down. And I'm having a baby, or I need time out for whatever reason. And women by this age are incredibly capable, and they don't see it because they've had such bitty careers and they've had to job hop and fit everything in around all these other things. So recognizing your capability, I think, is number one, and recognizing your capacity is, equally as important, because without you at an individual level recognizing that, no one else is likely to, just where the world's at in an evolutionary point of view. So,
Yeah.
Being able to self-advocate is incredibly important. Being able to say no, and let's face it, women are born people pleasers. We want to say yes. We want people to like us. It goes deeper than that, I think, in terms of safety. Historically, if you go back to the boomer generation or the silent generation prior to that, women had to say yes. They had to people please, because otherwise, golly, their husbands wouldn't look after them. And they were really stuffed at that point.
Yeah.
So, look, I think we're evolving as human beings, and I think the social and structural change is an incredibly important piece, as well as women starting to recognise in themselves and advocate for themselves exactly what it is they're going through, which can be tough when you're sitting in it. I get it. But, yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. And if you don't self-advocate for yourself, you end up burnt out, don't you?
Absolutely. And look, even when you do, sometimes you still end up burnt out.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And, you touched on it with your own ADHD when you were younger. The changes during puberty, pregnancy, and menopause are huge because it's a time where our, it's genetically based. So it's when we have the most, turnover of cells, and, our genes are most active in the epigenetic realm. So they're three times that are really important, but they're also massive transitional times psychologically as well. So there's the physical and the psychological layering up there, as well as, just trying to actually, integrate with the world. And it can be devastating for women. Suicidality for women is at its highest between 45 and 50.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
that's horrific, but also not surprising.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And like you said, like, we're the first generation to actually live through this kind of overwhelm with everything that we
Yeah,
have on our plate. So there's no handbook. There's no one to say, oh, this is how you navigate this, because first of all, you can't actually navigate it because it just doesn't work for a working woman. And that's something like I realized very quickly when I went back to work after having a child. I was like, holy hell, this does not work for a woman who is a mother. Like, you just can't do what you
yeah,
don't have the capacity, as you say. Like, you can't work the late nights. You can't do you can't work like a man, right? Because
correct.
you're the primary caregiver in most cases. Um, and so when we get to that burnout point, do you think that a lot of women end up blaming themselves for that?
Look, absolutely, I think they do, because I think, women of our generation were sold careers as a thing, and we've grabbed onto it and run with it because it's an opportunity. And it is. However, a lot of women, particularly when they're young, you start out, you've got the energy to burn. You can manage it. So it's almost like, well, I managed this then, why can't I manage it now? And, there's almost this blindsiding of, holy hell, um, most women, in Australia at least, statistically drop out of the workforce to some extent and go back to part-time at 32, and then at 52 there's a massive drop-off. So you can kind of see from, the statistics around that women are impacted, but it's not in a lot of ways done with a sense of self-compassion. It's just like, I can't cope and I've got to do all of these things, so I've got to take less than. And look, part-time jobs, casualised jobs, they're all very feminised. They're all often not as well paid. Um, there are gendered pay gaps, and there was a study done in 2024 that actually categorically said, like for like, women are paid less. And they labelled it a flexibility tax. So it is hard because, as a woman, that's probably going to be the outcome for you. You're not going to be taken seriously. You're going to get paid less, and it's just going to be a fight for you. So, in my own research and the white paper I wrote, that one of the biggest things women were doing to try and help themselves through this was just keep pushing through. And it's like, no, you will probably break. And, then like I said, you throw in that layer of neurodivergence, and there's a lot of women out there. Studies suggest 15 to 20% of women are neurodivergent. Now, if most of them aren't getting diagnosed as kids, guess what? There's a lot of women that are burning out because of this stuff, and they don't even know why. And it's on top of, all of life's other burdens. And look, honestly, I reckon they're absolute heroes to
Oh,
cope them.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, you've got to put something down.
Yeah.
And that can
100.
be really, really tricky.
Absolutely, that can definitely be tricky. And it's just because society doesn't allow for that, does it? Um,
No,
yeah. When
no.
you talk about the part-time jobs, I know, like, there was a time period where I was trying to find a part-time job, but being the sole breadwinner, it was like I still had to meet a specific, I needed a certain income at the end of the month, and those part-time
Yeah.
jobs just could not facilitate that. And then you just get into this cycle. Well, now I have to pay for childcare, and then that's another big chunk that comes out of your income, and it's just this, round and round you go, and it's very hard to get out of that. So you have to just then you end up in the full-time job, and you end up burnt out.
Yeah, yeah. And, I actually wrote a post just about this for my blog yesterday about, often women find themselves not thinking about what's resonant for them. They do the maths and they do the sums, And nowhere in their maths and equations is them or what is resonant for them. And so when women come to me with this problem, that's often the thing we talk about. It's like, yeah, okay, you need a certain number. Is that number fixed? Can that change? And how can we blend the number you need to earn with where you physically need to be at any given moment of any given day, with what you actually need and work that might be resonant for you. And I think that piece may be why a lot of women are driven towards entrepreneurship, because they see that as, well, it gives me flexibility, but it's also, there's no security really in that. And look, the way I framed it for myself was, well, I could get a job somewhere else and I could get made redundant anyway. So, really in the world as it is there a lot of security? But at least, with an employer, you get your sick leave, you get some annual leave. There are some benefits with that, whereas self-employment, you're completely on your own. And, that can be confronting. It's also a time where women are really vulnerable to things like spiritual bypassing. And look, I'm quite a spiritual person myself. I love a good crystal and a crystal shop. In fact, my first massage practice was in a place in Adelaide called the Eternal Spirit, which was like the premier New Age shop in Adelaide. But there are a lot of people out there that take power from. So spirituality is great when it gives power to you, when you're drawing, that from your own internal resources and it's empowering you. But there are a lot of gurus out there that take power from women and tell them what their identity should be, rather than guide them to exploring that for themselves. And that's where spiritual bypassing can be really dangerous. And women are particularly vulnerable, I think, at this time of life, because someone's giving them what they think are the answers and they go, hallelujah, I don't have to actually think about that and deal with that crap. Sorry, ladies, you do. You do, and it's worth it, and you're worth it, and it's worth the time.
Yeah. And I think with the to-do lists that we have that are endless, it's very hard to find time for yourself to just figure that out. So what would you say is what's one practical thing that someone could do to start that journey to figure out what it is for them?
Look, I'm not an advocate of this find your passion and everything will be sorted mindset. But one of the things I do work with around the idea of capacity and expanding it is a concept called flow state. It's a neuroscience hack. It's being ADHD, you may have experienced it. It's that hyper focus, and then the next step beyond that, where you're in that intense focus on, you lose sense of yourself and time. And we know that increases creativity, it increases problem solving, it increases a whole lot of good chemicals in the brain and makes us far more productive. So, and that extends beyond the time we're actually in flow state. So it almost rewires our brain for a period and makes us able to solve problems more creatively, think of different solutions, be creative, be productive, and just get stuff done. So one of the things that sits behind that is obviously having an interest or a passion for something. I don't know about you. If I try and do something that doesn't interest me, I'm really going to struggle to engage with it. I'm certainly not going to hit flow state. But as an autistic person, if it's interesting to me, like I'm like a squirrel on meth. I'm there, and that can help build capacity and that sense of self and internal connection piece. So I have a book on my website, an ebook that's a giveaway. It's about flow, reclaiming you, and it just gives some simple strategies around how you can create the right environment for flow state to exist. And that's, first of all, finding that piece about interests. What are you passionate about? And that may become your paid work. It may become your hobby, but it's still a great neuroscience hack nonetheless to build capacity. It also talks about, practically what most human beings' capacity is a day to be productive. It's not the 8 or 9 hours that employers think. It's more closer to 6 or 7 hours. So how can you structure your day to take advantage of the most productive hours for thinking and working, and aligning your decisions with that. How much stuff do you do that actually doesn't meet, the end purpose of the direction that you want to go in? A lot of people do a lot of stuff that's just habitual, it's just fluffing around, and it doesn't really serve a purpose. It's just because that's what they've always done, or that's what they were taught to do. And, just really examine, are those things helpful? And trying to make decisions once. There are some things you need to be present for every decision in. But, you take the example of Steve Jobs. If you ever saw him in anything other than jeans and a black shirt, I'd be surprised, because that's all he seemed to wear. It was a decision he didn't need to make every day. So,
I like that.
Yeah, what can you reasonably autopilot without risking that, you're making bad choices or leaving things to chance? And sometimes it could be as simple as, this is what I'm going to wear. I think it's a philosophy behind why people meal prep, their work lunches, because now I don't need to decide what I'm going to have. It's packed, it's ready in the fridge. One less decision in the morning to make. So they're all things that can really help, and they're covered off in the ebook on my site if you're interested. It's under the resources tab on my website. But yeah, go through it and actually think about what little changes, because I know from my own experience, I think women get stuck in this point where they think everything must change and have a fire sale in their life, and I've been there when I've burnt out, the marriage fell apart, the job went, everything happened for me at 30 all at once. Sold the house, husband gone, sold the car, quit my job, went back to school. It all happened. And look, I don't regret it, but it's a lot. It's a lot to hold all at once, all that change. So it might just be the little 2-degree shift, because you sort of think about a plane that shifts trajectory 2 degrees. It doesn't seem much at the beginning, but over time, that plane, goes a long way from where its original trajectory was. So I think, and 2 degrees is much easier to course correct too. If you kind of end up going, oh yeah, I actually really don't like this path, or it's kind of easier to bring yourself back to, a different path, or the one you were on, which, some women through counselling decide actually it's not that bad. There's just a few tweaks they need to make, and the path wasn't the problem. It was just how they were managing it was. So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that, the incremental changes. And what you mentioned, I've never thought about it, so that you, like, if you've made this small change and you, oh well, that's not actually, that doesn't feel right, you can still sort of navigate and change it a bit. I really like that, because it's not this massive change to your life that you're making, and now you have to undo that, or because any change can be quite exhausting.
Absolutely. And, like I said, fire sales are hard to unpick. Once the house is burnt down, it's burnt down. And look, that may be the best thing. For me, it certainly was. But I can actually tell you on the other side of it, if I'd known what it was going to take to get through that, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But I'm also glad I did, just fly blind into that, because otherwise I'd be probably even more stuck. So, only you know what's right for your life and situation, but don't jump straight to burning the house down.
Yeah, I love that. So let's circle back a little bit, and let's talk about your work. So you describe your work as holistic career architecture, blending Eastern wisdom and with a modern strategy. So can you explain that a little bit in practical terms for us?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I have qualifications in massage, polarity therapy, and Ayurvedic wellness coaching, as well as qualifications in career development. So traditional career development looks very much about the job piece and helping people work out what they're going to do a personality profile. Here's a resume, here's some interview coaching, off you go. You can do all of that. But also holistically, looking at women's capacity. What is it that they want? What is resonant for them? I think that's a massive piece that's often overlooked. And look, I've seen it, people have come out from sessions with career counsellors, they bought the package and gone, the career counsellor just told me, here's my skills, this is what I should do. the career counsellor may not have been wrong taking into all of their factors, but gave them no agency in that. So I'm very much about agency. I'm very much about self-care. I'm very much about getting home right before we worry about what's going on outside of home. Because it's really, really hard to be happy and productive in a career if you're unhappy and unproductive in yourself. So I talk a lot about self-care. I talk about embodiment. I talk about nervous system regulation, and some of those other things that help women along the way, just be more comfortable in their own skin and their own home, and that self-acceptance piece. Because I don't think it's easy to make the changes a lot of women need to make in midlife. We, like I said, we don't have role models for this stuff. So we're flying blind and trying to figure things out on their own. And, if things don't work out well because of a decision, it just erodes that self-trust even more, makes women more vulnerable to handing power over to others and loss of agency. So I'm really, really big on women having their own power and agency in what happens for them. And that might mean making some hard decisions, like I've got to cut back. I need to review what I'm spending money on in order to facilitate me working part-time. Or I'm going to go and start a business, but do it for the right reasons and with your eyes wide open. There's lots of good things about working for yourself, but it's not without risk. So it's about finding that balance that suits each individual woman. And I think a lot of people go, well, balance is in the middle. If I do so much time here and so much time here, then I've got balance. Well, no, that's not how it works. If you're in flow state, you're absolutely balanced. And if people can find a job where they can just drop into that flow state and spend 8 hours a day there, I can tell you that they're not people that are exhausted at the end of it. So it helps women, stretch their capacities, when they've got all these competing demands, and sometimes knowing what to put down and advocating for themselves. So yeah, it's far more holistic than just let's do a personality profile and write a resume and send you on your way.
I love that. That's really good because I think, it's 2026 and I think we live in a great time where we have all these amazing tools at our disposal where we can, we learn about nervous system regulation and how this can help us. And, it's something, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but this is big on my Instagram feed. I'm always seeing things about nervous system regulation, your subconscious mind patterns, etc. And I love how you talk about the flow states because I know, like, you can see all the books on my bookshelf. That's me.
Yep.
And my astrology, that's me in flow state. Yep. Like, I just, I always get ridiculed. Like, why are you buying another book? I'm like, because I need to just know more. Because I just, yeah, you love it so much. Yeah. So it's really great to find that. But now for some of your clients, I'm sure that when they come to you, they also have quite a bit of fear about this, making this change to their lives. So how do you help them navigate? Because fear can be quite debilitating for some people.
Absolutely. And, because I work from the place where I do, where I'm handing agency to others, it's like I'm here to hold space for this container. And, it's an interesting one in the sense of, if you go back to the Ayurvedic origin story of Shakti and Shiva, Shiva was the stillness. Shiva's masculine energy. It's the stillness. It's the container that holds Shakti, which is movement, creativity. Think Beth Dutton, and Rip. He's this still character who he just holds the space for her crazy, basically. So I and we all have a bit of that in us. Yes, women are embodied as women, men are embodied as men. There are some people born intersex, so they probably have a different doshic system in the Ayurvedic system. It's not something I know a lot about, but typically, we've got both that masculine and feminine in us. So I actually hold the container. So I lean into that masculine energy to hold that space and container to create that safe space for exploration. It's like, tell me your story. Tell me where that sits, and can we reauthor that story in a way that's more helpful moving forward? And for women in particular that have had trauma, and women in particular that, of this generation. And look, I think, in a sense, we were set up to fail by society. So that for a lot of women is incredibly traumatic. So, how can we reauthor that story and rewrite it in a way that's helpful, that's going to allow you to make the right decisions, to have that sense of power and agency? So sometimes it's holding the space and the container for that exploration piece, without having to make a decision. Just that exploratory space. And I think that's where a lot of, career counselling models, or practitioners don't do that, because, and look, I understand it. I've worked in government programs where you've got so many sessions to get someone, out the door. You've got some deliverables. And so I understand what it is to work in that space of deliverables. But I also know that people will move when they're ready. If they move before they're ready, it's probably not going to be the right move. And I can give an example. One of the ladies I worked with through Defence, came out medically discharged with PTSD, and, was also going through the process of ADHD diagnosis, in her 40s. And, she tried different things, and it's just holding the space for that. And, it took a good couple of years or more for her to settle on what the right thing was. So it was like, make that little shift of 2 degrees, try that. No, that's not working for me. I've got to pull back because I can't cope. I don't have capacity for that. Let's try something else. And so I think if you're fearful, I can understand why it may make you unwilling to want to move. But the problem is then you stay stuck where you are forever. So find the space and the person that you feel safe with, and allow yourself to be held, with someone that you trust, or by someone that you trust, to share your ideas, to explore, to try, to test, and fail if that's what happens. It took me a long time, to get to where I am, of knowing, okay, what's right for me and what's not. And a lot of that has been societal conditioning. So, and I think it's true for a lot of women. There was a list of expectations we were handed in an unspoken way, and that we, as women, try desperately to meet, and not being able to meet that list of expectations is not a failing on your part. You are not behind. You are not the problem. You are not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be safe to go, okay, well, this is not reasonable. What can I actually reasonably do?
100%. I love that. Because, I think we do put ourselves under a lot of pressure, and we judge ourselves a lot when we can't meet those expectations. And so how do you define success now in your life? And how is that different from what it would have been earlier in life?
Yeah, look, success is far less about money for me. I guess I am fortunate that, the hard yards I did when I was younger have paid off to a degree. I ended up remarrying, helped hubby get his dream job. So, finances aren't my biggest determinant. I'm not living by a number. And golly, that's a different conversation when you can actually be in that place of not living by a number. And that actually happened before I met my hubby. I had re-engineered my life. I realised by the time I was in my early 40s, I can't work full-time in a corporate office. I will always struggle with that. So I need to work remotely or hybrid at most. So I need like free range, basically. Then I realised, after, and it took me till I was in my 40s to stop beating myself up for my supposed shortcomings of burning out really quickly. And just went, okay, well, this is what I need. And I'm actually incredibly capable if I'm given what I need. So why don't I just give myself what I need?
Yeah.
So success for me is about making sure I actually have what I need to be really functional and to be able to do what I do well. It's about not working full-time. It's about making sure I, do the self-care stuff daily. I think a lot of people think self-care and they think of, the day spa and all of the, nice things. And look, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm a self-respecting Taurus woman. I love a good massage. But It might be going for a 20-minute walk in the morning. It might be starting your day. I actually block the first couple of hours of my day out as a rule, just to give myself the space to kind of get grounded in my day. So in Ayurveda, they have a term called dincharya, which is basically translates to routine. So that's my definition of success. Can I live in my routine? Can I be kind to myself and still help others? I do things for purpose and reason now, not just because I feel like I have to, or I'm told I should. And that seems to be working a lot better for me.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a huge shift. Because when you're in the corporate, it's definitely like I have to be in the office by this time and I have to put in this much effort and and I have to work 5 days a week, and you're always on somebody else's schedule and somebody else's what they need and what's fulfilling the company's whatever. So to be able to live in your own space and be like, well, this is what I need, and living for yourself, I mean, that's a great way to think of success, I think.
Yeah. And look, for those of you in corporate, my tip would be fill your calendar with what's important to you. Otherwise, others will fill it with what's important to them.
Yeah, 100%. I love that.
So, you still can take some agency back, even I think in the corporate space. And that's often a strategy that, some women that can't leave their jobs or don't want to do. It's about, okay, they define success within their current context. They don't change the context, they redefine and take the steps to, protect their own boundaries.
I love that. And I love what you say about self-love, because I bang this drum all the time, is that self-love is not going to have a manicure and a pedicure. As nice as that is, it's fantastic, but it's deeper than that. And I came to that realization just after I turned 40, after always hearing about self-love and not really understanding it completely, and having my own awakening and being like, oh, I see, and how that feels in the body. Yeah. And how that feels in the body, and just putting yourself first and what you need first. It's really, really important. Especially seeing as I'm a recovering people pleaser, which
I think most women are, honestly.
100%.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And do you feel better?
Oh, 100%.
Having made those shifts?
Oh, yes. I mean, they were hard in the beginning because, you've got years and years of conditioning and trying, always putting everybody else first. So it is hard in the beginning to make that shift, to get everybody else on board with you. But once they realize, oh, this is how the dynamic is going to be, and this is how the relationship's now going to be, she's not going to, fall all over herself to help me anymore. Once we get past that hump and things settle, then it's like, now I can start enjoying the relationships again in my life. As an example with boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah. And even within the work sense, like putting boundaries in, my kids come first, always. I will never apologize for that. And that's always 100% my stance, because jobs will come and go, and they won't. They're still going to be with me in 25 years' time.
Yes.
So no matter what, they always come first. And I know women don't always have that luxury, and they don't always have that option. And I've been in that situation before, where I've been in a role where I was put under a lot of pressure, and I ended up resigning. It was the best thing I ever did in my life, and I went to work for myself for a while. Best thing I ever did, because I had the flexibility. The money, not so much, but it was okay because I had the flexibility, I had more time with the kids, and I felt it was time for me to recover from the burnout and find myself more. And that's when I found the astrology, and I think it needed to happen, because you open yourself up, don't you? Once you clear away all that stress and that the expectations of others, and trying to live on this hamster wheel, you sort of open up space for other things to come in your life.
Absolutely you do, and it sounds like it's worked really well for you. And again, that piece of your sense of success and fulfillment wasn't defined by money.
Yeah,
and I think
100%.
Women when they're young, that's okay. I've got to have the career, I've got to have the title, I've got to have the money, and it may be just that's part of the evolution of a career for women, that you try that, and then realise once you've had kids, it doesn't work. And, look, I've got a daughter who's climbed the corporate ladder in government, advising, a government minister now, and she's not even 30 yet. But, I look at her career and go, if that's all you're going to do with your life, you're going to be amazing. But if ever you want children, you're gonna hit a really, really hard wall.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
it's also hard to tell her that. Maybe because I'm my mum.
Yeah.
But it may just be that it's difficult, when you're young, I think it's true for boys and girls. You can tend to think you're a little bit bulletproof, and
Yes.
you just keep pushing through and ride the wave. But I think having children for women, it changes the game, and it changes it in ways you don't ever expect or understand.
Oh, definitely.
And even if you haven't had children, that that transition into menopause and loss of fertility, it's a different kind of creativity once we become the crone, but it's confronting.
Yeah. Yeah. So when women, when they step out of the old system that we've been talking about, because we say, we agree that the system doesn't work for women. What are they reclaiming when they come out of that old system?
I think they're reclaiming themselves and their sense of agency.
Yeah.
And I don't think you realise just how important that is until you've had it, and then something threatens it again.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But I think, a lot of women have described, that the system as it is as gaslighting them. And I can understand that. It sets us up to fail. I don't think it's intentional. I just think it's ill thought out, and women haven't been considered in ways that they should be and need to be. But I think walking away from that, that sense of being gaslit or set up to fail can really scramble your eggs. Like having that clarity back about, okay, it wasn't just me that thought and felt that way, or couldn't cope, or didn't have the capacity and needed to change. And I think the more we talk about this, the more women start to see that. And I think it's a really important conversation for women to go, it's not just me. So I think they feel a lot less alone and isolated in it all as well.
Oh, definitely. That connection between all of us and that support to say, you're not alone, you're not good. Because sometimes we do feel like, or, why am I the only one that feels this way? But you're not actually. And I think we
No,
live in a great time right now where we have social media, we have all these means for us to get the message out there and to connect and to, unite. And, I think as a collective, we can push for change. We absolutely can push for change.
yeah,
I mean, we've seen that. I know it's happened in Australia, but I know in the UK, we've just had where parents have, come together to push government to do something about children and cell phones and cell phone usage. And I know
yes,
Australia, they've just passed a law, haven't they, about the same thing. And
yeah,
it's just to show like what a collective effort, like if we all come together and we say, well, the system's not working, it's broken, and we need to, because we're 50% of the population, aren't we? It's a big
yeah,
percentage. We're not in a minority, but it's just getting that message out there and getting us to realize
yeah.
that we're all in the same boat and we're all experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, as a collective, we can overcome that trauma of the past. I think the patriarchal
Yeah.
system, in its infancy, women were burnt at the stake, weren't they?
Yeah.
So, that lives in the collective consciousness. And
Yes.
I think as women, we're starting to rise and starting to collect and starting to realize, hey, we've got some power here. And what being able to earn an income has given us is collective power. We are now relied on for productivity, for taxation revenue, and we now have our own money. We are still at a disadvantage. We are still not treated equally or fairly on that front, but we have enough power that hopefully we're at a tipping point where we can say, this crap has to stop.
Yeah.
We actually need to start treating women a little bit more respectfully, and, looking after the people who look after our children, who look after our elderly. And, I know when I did my my postgrad certificate in career development, looking into concepts like universal basic income, to keep women from being in poverty. Most women that have, most people that are in poverty in Australia are women. They're single mother families. 80% of families that are single parented are led by women. So, being able to support women in those circumstances, those different life circumstances in which we find ourselves, rather than just saying, well, gee, lady, you'll just have to get a job and look after your 3 children, on your own, or whatever it is. Look, my son was, diagnosed with auditory processing disorder, ADHD, and autism quite young. So I had a kid that I had to run around to all these medical appointments and all this stuff. And none of that is quick and easy. And it's also really expensive to go through that process here in Australia. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but, waiting lists are years. And, if it's a public waiting list, you can add a few more years on if you even get seen to. And if you don't go on the public list, you've still got to wait, and it still costs a bomb. So, telling women in those sort of circumstances, oh, you just go get a job, love, you'll be all right. It's not, by the way, I'm neurodivergent too. Go wrong.
Yeah,
so,
I get. Yeah, I get really. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I really do think, providing a basic livable wage for women who are mothers is something that, society should look to. I think there's other things like, allowing families to be able to income split. Like, why can't my husband write half of his income and superannuation back to me and reduce our tax burden?
Yeah.
There are a couple of simple things that, could be done at a structural level to ensure women have superannuation, so retirement savings, and have equal access to money, and that would be done by agreement, and it probably save a lot of the crap that goes on in divorce courts later over money too.
Yeah. Oh yes, 100%.
Yeah.
It's still like, it amazes me that in society, like, we are the ones who are raising the next generation, right? The generation that's going to take care of us when we are older. So we need to make sure that that generation is raised properly, right? Because they're going to take care of us, and we need to make sure that they are, contributing members of society, and we're the ones that are doing it, the majority of the work, but yet we don't get treated with the respect, right?
Yeah.
That
I don't know how it's not seen as work to raise children, but I remember, when I went through high school, there were one guy I went to school with. He got married and had kids, and his wife desperately wanted to stay home with their kids. And his attitude was, I'm not having you sitting on your backside all day doing nothing. Like that. I mean, anyone who's raised a child will know. You're not just sitting there reading a book, sipping cups of tea, having a lovely old time. You might find 5 minutes for that in your day, but guess what? At 8, 9 o'clock at night, you're doing bedtime routines. You're the one getting up in the middle of the night. You're getting them up, when other people are resting and relaxing and, watching the latest Netflix or whatever. Mums are still at it. So this whole idea that, oh gosh, you took an hour for yourself just to have a breather during the day. Yeah, get a grip.
Yeah. I remember when I was going on maternity leave the very first time. So in the UK, you go for like 9 to 12 months. And I just remember getting so annoyed with all the comments being made by, I'm going to say it, the male employees in the company that I worked for, where it was always, oh, Adelia's going to go on holiday now. She's going to have a nice long holiday. And I was thinking to myself, holiday? I'm going to be up most nights with a newborn. I'm going to be changing nappies. I'm going to be doing feeds. I'm going to be taking care of a little person. That's not a holiday. Holiday is lying on the beach somewhere. That's a holiday. I'm not going on holiday.
Yeah, and don't forget the fact that you grew this little person.
Yeah.
And you pushed them out of your hoo-ha, and like your body's had a bit to get over.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, forget all of that. She's going on holiday, and and when I got pregnant the second time, it was the same kind of, 5 years later, it was the same kind of comments. And I was like, how is this still happening? It's 5 years later, and we have not moved an inch in our perception of what, what happens with mothers. So it just, those kind of things just really, really give me the ick.
Yeah. And look, that's in some respects still a big concern. I've got a teenage stepdaughter living full time with us, and she's in year 12 at school, so she's 16, 17, and some of the rhetoric that the boys are going on with is so disrespectful. It's like, where are you guys learning it? Is this from your dads or whatever? But I know in Australia, in primary schools, some states have brought in, programs around, conceptually around respectful relationships to try and drum this rubbish out of boys because they're still going on with it.
Yeah.
It becomes intergenerational. And, I think the only reason we haven't gone back to the dark ages again is because women have jobs and they have money and they have some degree of power to push back and say, your crap's not good enough. But, I look at the high school stuff going on for my stepdaughter at the moment, the way boys are treating girls, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, and we can't make that change alone. This is not like
Yeah.
just women need to fight for the change. We need men on board. We need
Absolutely.
men on board also contributing towards the change. It's not going to work without that because, like you say, I mean, it's just, generational stuff that's just going to keep going from generation to generation. And we will never get anywhere unless men get on board and start,
Yeah, we need strong male role models. And,
Yeah.
in a lot of, single parent households, boys have a lot of influence from their mothers, but they don't have that strong male influence about what it is to be a man. And, even in the education system, it's predominantly feminized in Australia. My husband is, one of not very many men in the school. And, he's seen over the course of his career, he's been in education 35, 36 years, that, boys, even in schools, don't have strong male role models. And it's actually incredibly important. So, men, absolutely. If you might be divorced, you might hate your ex or whatever, but by golly, your kids need a strong male role model. They don't need to grow up hearing your rhetoric about how you hate their mother and how you hate women and, the child support problems you're having or whatever it is. Like, I don't think it feeds the right sort of thinking processes in boys. And look, I think about the boys at the school my stepdaughter's at now, and, some of them come from, homes where mum and dad are still together, stable, have had a pretty good upbringing in life, and they still carry on with this rubbish. So,
yeah,
I don't know. I think, but yeah, you're right. Men really need to step in. And maybe that's the flip side of, women having more power. Men have lost some of theirs and they don't quite know where they fit. And that's, a conversation, men probably need to have with their own, counsellors or elders or people that listen to and support them to work out where they fit. But I would say they are needed. Absolutely, they are needed.
100%. I heard someone talking on another podcast a while back, and she was talking about it was more around religion, but I love the concept of like divine union. So the feminine and the masculine coming together, supporting each other, and uplifting each other, and that's what we need. It's a balance. It's not one being more powerful than the other and one not needing the other. It's that we need to be in balance with each other. Because
Absolutely.
the masculine is the masculine, the feminine is the feminine, and we each contribute something, and together it's a union. 100%.
Yeah. And, the piece about money again, typically men play the role of breadwinner going to work and women play the role of staying home and looking after the kids, and workloads were balanced. And in a healthy union, that's not my parents are still together in their 70s, and my mum got pregnant with me at 17. But she chose the option of stay-at-home mum. She took care of everything at home. Dad took care of all of the going to earn the money. And that's worked for them, and they've both been happy with their choices in that. And I'm not suggesting that's necessarily the right choice for every woman or every man. However, being able to play a role and not be financially penalised for playing a role that involves unpaid labour is something that I think as a society we need to really look hard at.
Oh, definitely. And I hope we'll get there. But we need men on board helping us as well. So this is not something that women can do alone.
Absolutely.
Well, Narelle, it's been really great talking to you. So I have 2 more questions left. So one question is a question that I ask every guest that comes on the show, and that is, what would you tell your younger self if she was sitting next to you right now?
Oh, probably so much. But I think it would be just to go easy on yourself, that self-compassion piece, just you don't have to have it all figured out, and just go easy on yourself.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because we can be so hard on ourselves, especially when we're young, and we still
Yeah.
have to like grow into the person that we're going to become.
Yeah. And thinking we need all the answers. You're never going to have them.
No, but it's a societal thing again, expecting you to have your life figured out at 21. And I mean, God, you're still a child at 21, aren't you?
Absolutely.
And so my last question is, so where can listeners connect with you and find your work? Is there anything you want to, any promotions you want to talk about or share with the audience?
Yep. Okay, so where to find me? I am on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram and Facebook at Soul Compass Careers are my handles. You can find me on the internet, www.soulcompass.life. Under the resources tab, you will find links to my white paper as well as Flow Reclaiming You, which is an ebook that I give away freely. It's my gift to the world. And in terms of what I do, I work with women. I can work with women anywhere. So if you're feeling stuck, do reach out. I'm looking at putting together a 12-week group program for women. A, it'll keep the cost down. B, it creates community and helps reduce isolation for women. And C, I'm planning to deliver it in a way it can be packed in around the edges. I know women are already busy. So if you want to turn up to a live call, you can. If you can't, there's a recording. You can listen to it when you want, workbooks, and also including, an Ayurveda corner within that program. So it's a really, really holistic program around, re-architecting your life around you, with you at the center of that context, not a magical number, not a job title, not just you. And then working out from there how that looks and how you practically roll that out, for want of a better term. It's very corporate, isn't it? Roll that out into the world. So please do reach out if that's something that interests you. I'm going to be running a beta program soon. I'm actually putting the content together as we speak and doing the tech research on platforms, which is not my strong suit. So it's taking me a bit longer than, I'd hoped, but we will get there. So, yes, and look, big thank you to anyone who's still listening, and to you, Adelia, for saying yes and inviting me to the Midlife Awakening. It's been a really lovely chat.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really great. I'm so glad we've had this conversation, and I can't wait for it to air and everyone else to share in the conversation with us. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll put all the links of your website and etc. I'll put that in the show notes for anyone who wants to find you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think what I'm really taking away from this conversation is that so many of us have been blaming ourselves for something that was never ours to carry in the first place. And that's a hard truth to sit with, but it's also a really freeing one. It's an empowering one, because it means you're not broken. You don't need fixing. You just need a different way of living, working, and supporting yourself. And a big part of that is community. Because one of the things Narelle spoke about, and something I believe so deeply, is that so many women are going through this quietly thinking it's just me, when it's actually not. We're all in the same boat. We're all having the same experience. And this is exactly why I created this space, and why I care so much about building a community around this conversation. Because when you start hearing other women say, me too, everything shifts. There's less shame. There's less isolation. And you start to realize that maybe, just maybe, you are not the problem. So if this episode resonated with you, which I really hope that it did, I'd love for you to come and join us, whether that's through my community on Substack, on social media, both on Instagram, Facebook, on TikTok, or wherever you feel most comfortable connecting. You don't have to navigate this on your own. And if you want to connect with Narelle, I'll leave all of her details in the show notes. She has incredible resources, including her free ebook and an upcoming program for women who are ready to stop forcing themselves into a life that doesn't fit and start building one that actually does. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, which I'm sure you do, you know what to do. Send this over to her so that she can have a listen. And again, so we can build that support system with each other. Please don't forget to rate and review the podcast. This gives me the ability to keep bringing you this content every single week. And I promise you, there's more women that are feeling this way, and we need to come together, and we need to realize this, and that we actually have power in numbers. So anyway, that's me ranting for today. I'm sure you've heard enough of my voice. I just want to say thank you for being here and sharing this conversation with us. If you've listened up until now, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support and your love. And I leave you with this. May you be well, may you be healthy, and may your soul awaken and your heart awaken to who you are always meant to be. Till next week, take care of yourself, take care of your heart, and remember, it's never too late to begin again. Bye for now.